Welcome back to Deep Thoughts, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to shoot another night episode as I pull down this punch Cuban here. I've been toying with an idea that has grown on me a little bit. It's trivial in nature to anyone who's into the supernatural. It's a trivial notion, a trivial thought. But I think it warrants a little bit of revisiting because we might be able to add something to it through a little 1 hour, stint in this. And the notion has to do with the difference between the way we take in senses as a human being and the way that the machinery in the world takes in senses as we have designed them. Because what do we do in this world? We're always trying to figure out what reality we're in. At least those of us who watch this show. Okay. So it's only as accurate as we perceive it to be through our five-sense system, and it's only as accurate as we design it to be in the mechanics that we can discover to sense things, right? Obviously, this microphone's picking up my audio. This camera's picking up my video. If you had a smell-o-vision, it'd be so much better. There's a lot of you out there that actually have experiences with metaphysical, supernatural things. You've seen a ghost. You've seen something that came to you. I have a couple experiences in my lifetime, which I've repeated several times, and consequently at night episodes. So I thought season 4 should get a good dose here, but there's going to be a little bit of a twist on this. And for those of you who've seen every single episode, you're going to laugh because you know exactly what I'm going to be talking about. Just briefly, I'm not going to get into major detail. For those of you who are new to the show, brace yourself if you're into the completely clinical, pragmatic world where you like the Force and Star Wars to be completely explained. I had a situation where I went to Disneyland, and I had Walt Disney walk up to me in front of the bank, which was over on the right side of the entrance at the time, and he told me where to find a guy named Bob Gurr. You guys have heard this a million times if you've heard all the episodes. For those of you who are new, Bob was hired by Walt in 1954 to do propulsion systems and to document the creation of Disneyland. I just met Bob 2 weeks earlier at a Christmas party, and Bob was standing over by a ride that he had redesigned from his original ride. Actually, sorry, he didn't redesign it, but he did the original submarine ride, the propulsion system. He did a bunch of rides. But he was standing in front of it waiting to ride it because he's the oldest surviving Imagineer, as I understand it, and I walked straight to him because Disney put a little pin in my mind, and with my girlfriend, we're hungry, we're supposed to be going to eat, ride 2 rides, and get out of there. And I took him straight to an area of the park that I never go. Had this show existed when it happened, I would have gone to Disney security, told them the story, and had them run back the tape, and then show you me walking from the bank directly to the submarine ride, which is now Finding Nemo. No diversions, didn't look at any rides, didn't hit any dead ends and turn around. I went straight to the dude, and he was there. And he was held up for 50 minutes because the ride was broken. Had the ride worked properly, he would have ridden it and walked off long before I got there. Interesting, right? But now, if I roll back the tape, the mechanical device that senses photon, friction, and try to see Walt, would I see him? I don't know. There are videos online of supposedly a being, a humanoid, walking out of the haunted house and crossing through New Orleans, walking across the water towards the steamboat and disappearing over there. A close friend of mine worked there for 7 years, said Walt's all over the place. He talks to you. He was on the steamboat managing the ride during the parade, and he said he and his friend heard Walt say, "You better get away from that engine. The boiler's about to blow." And they both looked at each other and said, "Did you hear that?" And they said, "Yeah." And they said, "What do you think?" He goes, "We got to get out of here." Sure enough, they walked 10 feet and the thing blew up. The boat was out of commission for 6 months. 10 years after meeting Bob, I called him up and told him the story. And he said, "I'm not even the slightest bit surprised. That stuff's been happening for years. Walt lives there." Interesting. That's my story. The only other thing that happened to me is one of my grandmothers died that morning. She came to me in my kind of twilight waking up phase. I saw her in my mind's eye hovering over the bed. And she said, "I just want you to know I'm on the other side and I'm fine." 2 o'clock that day, my mom called me and told me that she passed. And I sort of said to my mom, "Yeah, I know." But my mom isn't into that sort of thing, so just kind of went in one ear out the other. I should have made a big deal about it, and that way she would have remembered it. So what if we can't track what we see in the metaphysical world with our cameras and our devices? Maybe we never can, because the sensory system is an intangible part of our being, our soul, our third eye, the eye that's on the inside, that doesn't reflect anything in this world that's in the material world. It's the eye, it's the spiritual eye that can see spiritual things. How would that change the world for all of us? How would we begin to prove it? This is where the rub comes in, the really interesting rub. What is proof in this world, and how do you prove it? I say I saw Walt Disney. All right. You didn't see him. How can I prove it to you? If I had the tapes of me walking directly to Bob Gurr, then you might have 50% of what you need. A skeptic would always remain a skeptic. Not a bad thing, but that's their job. They have to say, well, I don't know, maybe you sensed him in the park. Your brain sensed him in the park. Then your brain created this apparition of Walt to get you to go between these 2 points in your head. My brain completely imagined this guy, and I've read books on this guy that are super duper thick, several of them. I've watched, at one point, I binge watched his whole televised history. Like every time he ever showed up on television, every YouTube video I could find, I watched and watched and watched. All of his little introductions of rides, his opening of the park, of Disneyland, his introductions of new movies, everything, interviews, all that stuff. Never dreamed about the guy. Not once. I've dreamed about Prince a million times. I don't dream about Walt. So what if, or I should say this, what should we do about trying to prove something that by its very nature is outside of the realm of what human beings consider proof in 2018, in the 21st century? Perhaps my story works on people that have experienced it, right? When I told Bob Gurr about this, he was kind of, one of these situations. He's a very famous person, and we share a famous friend. This has been 10 years. He was 75 years old when this happened, and he's 85 when I told him. And so he was kind of in just a mildly suspicious, sort of annoyed emotion when I got him on the phone. And when I told him how he knew me, obviously it immediately melted off very quickly. He's a sweetheart, man. And then when I started telling him this really quickly, I got to the point very quickly, and then he just sort of was like so matter-of-fact about it. Now, coming from a kid who was in his 20s, who worked security, not security, but he worked in the park's operation for 7 years, that person's young and probably would love to hear a ghost story. It's not that you can't maintain such a desire as you get older, but to have Bob go from sort of a, okay, who are you? What am I listening to you for? To, you know what? That doesn't even surprise me. And he went and told me 2 or 3 stories of sort of magical things that have occurred to him, not only in his life in general, but especially around the Disney park and related to Disney events. He said he pulled into the Disney parking lot once, and he was supposed to meet some people at the park. And, Disneyland parking lots were gigantic things. They don't exist anymore. They're all parking garages now. But there used to be giant parking lots, and you could turn your head completely around and see that someone's there, someone's not there. There's a car parked, there's not a car parked. And he said he parked his car in an empty parking lot. No sooner did he get out of the car that he had a car and 2 guys just right on him who were supposed to meet him there. And he said there was no one in the car, no one in the park. I turned around and looked behind me. There's no one behind me. And he was a lot younger than 85 when this occurred to him. It's interesting. But what do we do as human beings if we wanted to develop a science around something that could sort of free our mind and give us perspective of where we are in this universe, if we can't prove it? And what does that mean, can't prove? What is the repercussion to mankind if you can't prove something? Well, the biggest problem is it's very difficult to share it with other people, especially people that are very discerning about making claims of such a kind. Now, if any of you have dabbled in sharing your ghost story or spiritual experience, whatever it is, something in your mind's eye, something you think was an apparition that you saw, a voice you heard in your head, a touch on your body from someone you think might have passed, and you find someone who absolutely has had all those experiences and they jump on board really fast, like, oh, really? Well, me too, and me too, and me too. It doesn't mean that they're not just like you. It doesn't mean that they haven't had these exact same experiences. In fact, that's kind of rejuvenating in your spirit when you can hear someone who's had like-minded things. However, there is something very special with someone who has been hiding a single experience and just kind of saying, really? Because I had an experience, one, or maybe two, whatever, and I haven't told a soul. And I've been thinking about it for 20 years, 10 years, whatever. I've analyzed the day. I didn't drink anything. I don't take drugs. I wasn't on any medicine. I was healthy. I wasn't in any distress. In fact, I was loving life, and this crazy thing happened to me. One of my fantasies about this world is that we can start creating some sciences, and these do exist. I'm kind of being facetious about this, but more of a mainstream research attitude towards some of this more metaphysical data. Because we're sitting here comparing footnotes that should be PhD thesis on these subjects. And I think that through dialogue, we start to unlock possible logical paths that we can use to start this dialogue, to start comparing notes, as well as heighten our senses to see more in the meantime, right? What if you listened to an episode and I triggered something in your head? Maybe it's nothing that I said to do, but it's something I reminded you about your idea of something to do. And you started that regiment every day. And then you start to open your mind and see more. And you go see something. But instead of seeing it in some serendipitous way that happens to you when you least expect it, you see it in a way that is very lucid. And matter of fact, it's like having a lucid dream when you know it's happening and you're like, oh my God, this is happening right now. Like Walt's right in front of me. What do I do? Walt walked by my left side. He walked up to me with a little cigarette in his hand. He had brown pants on. I can't remember. I almost think he just had a white shirt on. He didn't have a jacket on. At one point I thought he had a jacket on, but the more I think about it in my head, I don't think he did. But he just used his cigarette hand, his right hand, to go, he's over there. And he walked by me to the left. And the weird thing was I didn't track him to the left to see if he still existed over there, to see if he could have turned around. Like a movie, you turn around, you look at the guy, he's leaving the room, and maybe he stops, he turns around, and he goes, and, be careful on this ride. Don't eat that food. Like, enjoy this thing. And nice job on that thing yesterday or something. He could have said something else. But I didn't track it because I was so like, whoa, what the hell? And it was so quick. 3 or 4 seconds. But how do we metabolize vision? Just to obsess on this for 1 second. You know how it works. Your eyeballs take in light. It's a bunch of electricity gets mapped back to your visual cortex, which then gets all sorted out. You have 2 different angles of viewing on something, and our brains have beautifully created this sort of fictional facsimile of reality inside our brains such that I know that something's further away than something that's close up based on how these 2 images are compared. But there's another eye inside your brain that our ancestors of this world seem to be utterly obsessed with. And I mean obsessed with. And it's your third eye. It's the spiritual eye that's right inside your head. And it doesn't need to be outside of your head because it doesn't care about your skull. It's just there. And it's like everything that is spiritual can penetrate your skull and be seen by your third eye. There's a lot of belief that the glands in your body, I talk about this every once in a while, your chakra glands, your pineal gland inside your mind is a gland that seems to be a key instrument inside your mind that gives you cognitive abilities, your ability to see what's really going on in the world in a very conceptual way. Pain and suffering is very recognizable when your pineal gland works right. When it doesn't work right, you're very docile, you're very drony, very zombie-ish. Your channel to empathy starts to shut off because you don't have any. That's where fluoride comes in. You do what you're told. If you happen to gain any level of resistance, it's usually to resist those who can see. You shouldn't see that. What you're seeing is wrong. Just conform. Just conform. But now, how does a research experiment work? Usually someone writes some form of protocol, a methodology, a list of things that you do, just like a list of how to bake grandma's cake. You hand out the protocol to the world, and you conduct the experiment. You follow the list of instructions perfectly. And if you do it right, and the protocol is written properly, you have the same exact experience, minus environmental conditions, that the other team had. Well, how do we recreate something as outrageous as seeing a ghost? Isn't that a very proprietary thing in time? But they'll tell you that there are locations on planet Earth that are haunted by spirits. Haunted probably being something that is, I would imagine, frowned upon by those who are actually tapping into this world. Can you imagine just being a spirit that wants to communicate with the living? And every single time you do it, somebody screams, somebody freaks out, and they call it a haunted house. And you're like, God damn it, I'm not haunting a house. It's just like Beetlejuice. After they calm down, they just start talking to the girl, right? No big deal. They're not trying to scare the parents anymore. It's just what it is. And of course, after the parents kind of take off, wherever they take off, the chick owns the house and she hangs out with the ghosts, right? Now, reality, this thing we've chosen to agree upon that allows you to watch a YouTube video, this is something that we are exposed to a lot. And the circumstances are very evident, very objective, because, hey, we can both go to the Eiffel Tower and touch it and go, my God, this thing really exists. Look at that thing. Oh my God, it's huge, right? But if I said, okay, I want you to buy a season pass to Disneyland, I'm going to introduce you to all the surviving Imagineers and Bob Gurr. Now let's walk around the park, and Bob's going to hide in there somewhere, and let's see if we can get Walt to tell us where he is. Let's play peekaboo with Walt, or Marco Polo of some sort, right? You automatically would laugh, right? He's not going to come out for that reason. It's not a test. He did that out of the love of his heart. I don't know why he did it, actually. He did it for some reason that was his reason, not my reason. Did I need to see Bob? Nah. Did we exchange the cure to cancer? No. We had about a 5-minute conversation about him mountain biking that day. I made jokes that he was 75 years old, that I was a lot younger, and I would be terrified to do what he did that day, right? Which is mountain bike all over California, up in the hills. I think, too, as we share our experiences, we're sharing sort of the top layer of the experience, and we're not breaking it down in a scientific manner. Again, there are college universities with, metaphysical, supernatural little departments that do things sort of like Ghostbusters, and probably not as popular today as they were back in the 70s when everyone was dropping acid and seeing a hell of a lot more of the universe than anyone else did. But they're out there, right? Especially funded by government programs. But unless we take our experiences and get rid of the ghost story elation of this special thing happening to us and start breaking down the physicality of it, the timing of it, how long did you see the guy, what did you exactly see? Is it something that someone else saw? Is it inside your mind's eye? How does it compare to all the other mind's eye daily imaginations that you might have when you're sitting there daydreaming about some fantasy that you'd like to have in this world? How much different is it than that? In my experience, there have been no other experiences in my life that are like the Disney experience. None. My grandmother that I saw, I think I had my eyes closed. I think I had just kind of rolled over. It was a very bright morning. And it was just like I had just kind of rolled over and closed my eyes, and it was like she was right there. It wouldn't have been a big deal had my mother not called me a couple hours later to tell me she had passed. And the fact that she said, I'm on the other side, and I'm okay, was very cool. She knew her and I were very, very close, right? There's a special bond between a grandparent and a grandchild if you allow it to happen. And they typically can get closer to you than they can get to their own children who are busy in their, rebellious phase and trying to prove to mom that they know more than you than she does, right? Sort of thing. As a grandchild, you're just like, hey, I'm so happy to see you. What'd you do today? But now, what if we started making designations? Let's say we use the phrase proved reality. Well, I live in proved reality. What does that mean? That means that mechanical means are the means by which we deem something to have actually occurred or not occurred. But now what if we said spiritual reality, faith reality, observed reality, something different, something with a little bit of metaphysical nature to it? And I'm sure that there's books on this and there's proper words for all the things I'm saying. There was an experiment by a gentleman that lived in Haverhill, Massachusetts. I think his name's McDonald or something. I lived in Haverhill, Massachusetts, which is crazy. But it's called the 21-gram theory. And it's been debunked and pissed on by a bunch of people. And the theory goes like this. For those of you who know it, you're going to be right on board. But there was a doctor who had this theory that a soul had weight. That it had physical, tangible mass of some sort within this tangible, proved reality. And so what he ended up doing was measuring people's weight down to the fraction of a gram during death. And on one particular occasion, a gentleman lost 21.3 grams the second after he died. And it's obviously, the time is very specific. If you let anyone sit after they've died, there's a million excuses as to why that person would have lost weight, right? Later on, a doctor did a bunch of experiments on dogs, because dogs are easy to kill, I guess. And he killed a bunch of dogs. And he was noticing a loss in weight right after the dogs passed away. He blamed it on sweat glands that fire right at death. Which is like, that sounds like he thought, he's like, I totally debunked this other dude's 21.3 gram thing. And he was saying it was sweat glands. That sounds like it would take a little while. If the epidermis sweat, the sweat still on the epidermis is still part of your overall measured weight, unless you towel down the dog and go, okay, I picked up 21 grams of weight, off this perspiration of a dog. Now, I don't know if that was true, the 21 gram thing ever really occurred, or if this guy was creating a theory, because he created a hypothesis that this was the case, and then he did experiments and proved it correct. So sometimes, just like dinosaurs, where they postulate something to exist, found a tooth, faked the dinosaur, and then all of a sudden, for the rest of eternity, that fake dinosaur is the way that dinosaur looks. And that tooth belongs to that fake dinosaur they created. This went on for 40 years in dinosaur, paleontology, right? But I think it's interesting that someone tried to take the spiritual realm, your soul, and give it a tangible measurement. That, if there's any flaw to the theory, it would be that is these are, apples and oranges. The two things don't actually exist in the same realm of measurement. If the soul were to have any mass, I would just simply theorize that the energy that consumes, the energy that is consumed to create a soul, if that's the case, and I do not believe that's the case, it would be an ethereal-based blocking, right? Ether's trying to pass through the brain or the body, and the soul energy is in there blocking the ether from passing through your body, which then creates a push-down collision, and then your body has more weight. And the second that this soul drains out of your mortal coil and flies off into the distance, hey, the more ether goes through your body, thus lightening the load, and you are lighter. That's how I would theorize it to occur, if that was indeed the case. When we look at the entire idea of a soul, and I covered this in my soul episode, let's say you believed in a soul. I believe in a soul, and not a Christian soul, or an Islamic soul, or a Jewish soul, just a soul. Some sort of collection of, we'll call it energy, okay, I would call it soul energy or spirit energy, that is your unique, distinct identity in this universe. It is what makes you who you are versus someone else. I think Hindus have put together a pretty good case that attaches to all the glands down your chakra, down your spine. Seems like a good place to attach, right? Attaching to my toe, that's a little bit weird, right? Obviously, all my cognitive thoughts and my version of reality is loaded up inside my skull. I literally believe that I feel myself living behind my head, looking out of this Malkovich apparatus I call my body. But now, where would the soul attach to the body? That's the $1 million question. Is it merely that it rides shotgun in space and time? It's not really attached to the body, but it has the ability to send out a radio wave to the cells in our double helix, on our protein patterns, to tell it what to do. It's broadcasting a wireless signal, perhaps. It seems to be pretty attached to our body, doesn't it? Because you can get hit by a car and not die, or let's actually take that out. You can be in a drag race car that goes from 0 to 300 miles an hour within 10 feet, or something outrageous like that, and you don't lose your soul. It's not back there with the lights. It's continuing to go with the car. Could a human body be moved so quickly through space and time that you would leave your soul behind? I don't know. Doesn't seem like gravity pushes on your soul, so maybe there's zero force on your soul, so there's no big deal. You're just there. Maybe moving through space and time is a complete illusion in itself. You never really move at all. Just the stuff around you moves. How many of you have a degree in college? You took a bunch of courses, and these kind of conversations absolutely, positively never occurred one time, except when you were high as a kite with your dorm mates, right? Your fraternities and your sororities. Maybe if you're in a good nerdy one, right? It's some really good deep conversations. But outside of that, does society ever talk about these kind of things? No. Well, there's two reasons why. The lowbrow reason why is that it's embarrassing to think like this, right? What are you thinking about that kind of stuff for? That's silly stuff. Don't you worry about your bills and all your obligations and all the negativity in the world? Isn't that what you're focused on? But probably the more fundamental reason why we don't have those conversations is we have absolutely no vocabulary at all. Anytime someone who takes it in deep college, where they do get into metaphysical stuff, they start using words that are not as accessible, scientific words, the Dan Aykroyd vocabulary to this whole problem, right? Anytime you watch the Ghostbusters episodes, it's really, he talks about ectoplasma and all this other kind of stuff, and it's just brilliant. It's funny and hilarious. But that is sometimes the sort of dialogue you run into when you get into the supernatural. Well, that cuts off the conversation, doesn't it? Mr. Big Vocabulary is more worried about his or her perceived IQ than really getting down to the nitty-gritty conversation. There's a lot of homeless people in the world that talk to themselves, right? And we look at them and we pity them. I've talked about this a couple times. But don't you ever wonder, who are they talking to? Is sitting outside with no social interaction the medicine, the precursor to being able to see something you didn't see before? Because you just keep looking and looking and looking, and you're not moving. We preoccupy ourselves in the modern world, don't we? You get up, you get out of bed, you get your shower, you put all the stuff on, you get some breakfast, you go to work, you work, you come home, take care of the kids, get some more food. Maybe you go out to a nightclub, maybe you go get a dinner. Maybe you make sweet love and then you go to bed. And it repeats over and over if you're lucky. What if you didn't have a job? What if you didn't have any kids? What if you barely could find another soul that would talk to you? And you're just sitting there thinking and thinking and looking. Would the mind get so bored it would play tricks on itself? That's what they always say, right? Cabin fever people go crazy because they start to, manifest something. There's been Star Trek episodes, brilliant Star Trek episodes about cabin fever, where someone has to put the whole crew to sleep, and there's a couple people that are going to stay awake for the whole event. I think one was Enterprise, where the whole crew had to go to sleep, but T'Pol, the Vulcan chick, she was able to stay awake. Maybe it was 7 of 9. I can't remember. It was 7 of 9. Anyway, it was someone who shouldn't see something, shouldn't suffer from cabin fever, but they ended up manifesting and creating characters that were awake that weren't awake. They were still asleep. By the way, just as a kind of report on something I had mentioned in several episodes back, I can't even remember which one, but this book that I read that said that if you stay up really, really late, like 36 hours plus, your left brain goes to sleep on its normal cycle and your right brain takes over the entire mind. And I've been doing so much traveling lately, hence the delay in the episodes, that I was up and I probably had like 2 hours of sleep to go on my trip, and then I went to the location I'm going to, and then I slept in this kind of, it's a nice hotel, but it had some noise issues, so that kept me up all freaking night. And the next day, I was sitting there starting to think of like comedy things I was going to write. I collect comedy ideas for film. And I was just on a roll. My creative mind was going crazy. And I was sitting there going, holy crap, I'm in that sweet zone. I'm in that sweet zone where my creativity's off the chain. Because old Lefty has gone to sleep. Mr. Pragmatic Bill Pear's snoring in the next room. The reason I mention that is, well, what part of your brain would probably be more apt to do the most research in a metaphysical world? Probably the right brain, right? It's the creative one. It's the abstract one. It welcomes abstract data, abstract time flow. It doesn't care. It's like, hey, relax, man. Don't worry about all the rules. Let's just see what we have in this dream of ours, right? Then there's another question. The other question is, if the pineal gland is the true touch point for the third eye, as the Egyptians believed big time, right? If that is the case, and there's plenty of other cultures that believe the same thing, but I love the Egyptian side of things, what part of the brain would process that input? Probably the right brain. Probably the right brain. I'm willing to bet the left brain gets a copy of the data as well, but the left brain starts comparing it to accounting and says, oh, this doesn't follow the rules. We know what tangible proof reality is. What the hell is this shit coming in about a ghost? Those don't exist. You're going to embarrass yourself. And the right brain's like, hey, dude, I know what to dress up for during Mardi Gras next year. Now, some of you may recall or be yelling at the screen saying, but dude, cameras have caught tons of stuff. And maybe you're right, and maybe you've been had by some hoaxes. I don't know. The most common one I see out, there's two, but one is more common than the other, is people who have passed on showing up in photographs. So they'll take a Christmas photograph the year after a child passes away in the family, or a grandparent or something, or someone. And they will look at the film that they bought recently, back in the old 35 millimeter days, and I think it's potentially being claimed in the digital realm. It'd be much more impressive in the digital realm, but then again, things can be superimposed. The only way we can prove or have at least a little bit of proof is to look back on photographs of the person at the age that they show up in the photograph and make sure no one has taken that photograph in the past, right? But obviously, someone conducting a hoax would probably erase the original, right? So there's that. There is this idea that they've caught spirits in photographs. There's a lot of little videos around about, so many of them have been proven to be fake that it's hard to give any of them validity. And it's a bummer that people fake this stuff, because then we don't know. It's like disinformation towards the idea that maybe a camera could pick up some apparition that is actually forming true light in this world, maybe plasma energy or whatever, right? Now, I don't know, I cannot remember the name for this next example. Some of you are going to know its name. But there is a situation when you take, it doesn't really happen as much anymore, but the old cell phones and the old digital cameras back in the day, when you take a photograph during a night with precipitation in the air, some foggy night, some night that it's actually raining but you're not in the rain, they would get these round dots in photographs. And it really looks like water on the lens, and the water has a certain thickness and diffusion, and so light bounces right through it and refracts, and you typically get, because it's a contact lens, it's focusing all the light like a radar directly into the receiver and the camera, and so you get these bright spots, and they're a little freckly and that kind of thing, because the water again has different levels of density as it creates a raindroppy thing on the lens. With the cell phone camera, it happens a lot because we hold them up, we put them down, we hold them up. We might even splatter some of our drink on it. We might open up some soda water next to it, and all the soda bubbles are hitting the lens when you don't know it, and then you take a photograph. And I used to have a friend of mine who, she would have one or two of these in her photographs, and she would always think it was her brother who had passed. Okay, it warmed her heart, so I let her have that. Reality, and maybe she's right, I don't know. There were the shows on TV. I think it was the John Edwards show, right? There's a few of them. But they get in sort of this town square thing where they call on spirits who have passed to go through the medium of John Edwards to then talk to their relatives. I've talked about this in the past. There's been a couple cases where it looked like some pretty hard dudes were converted. Now, I've had friends that have gone to the recording of that show. They said the show's recorded for like 12 hours straight, and there's a lot of misses, and so they cut together all the wins, and they make it look like the guy doesn't have any mistakes whatsoever. But it's a lot more mistakes than there is hits, so you have this cold reading, gypsy reading notion that, well, if you guess enough, you're going to come up with some stuff. When the guy hit back in the day, it was pretty damn convincing, because the stuff was like morbidly specific in a lot of cases. Sometimes it was just very sad, okay? But the idea is, if we were to try and parse this sort of reality and see if there's anything there, that's probably the actual format we would want to create. The room, the classroom, the research center would have to be people that are probably not the guy who saw Bigfoot in Close Encounters of the Third Kind, but people who are sort of, they're two parts out of it. They don't want to believe it, but they've had this one experience. And so they're like, okay, I would never believe this in a million years, but this happened to me, so I'm interested. Tell me. It's more like Richard Dreyfuss in Close Encounters of the Third Kind. He's like, I would never believe in UFOs, but God damn it, I saw one. Have you seen the side of my face? It's tan, And so I don't know how you set that up without attracting all the people that have been seeing hundreds of these things. Perhaps the ones that have seen a ton, we simply divide them up into groups, and we say, if you've seen one, you go in this group. You've seen them your whole life, you go in that group. If you're uncertain, you go in this third group till you find out what group you're in. But now, who controls the experiment? Is everyone involved subjectively involved? Probably not. We want to have a control group that actually observes the group that is making these claims. And they're playing devil's advocate, maybe not directly to the people to take the wind out of their sails or to make them feel ridiculed for admitting things, right? But through some glass window or, whatever, they're embedded in the group, and they keep quiet, or they have a fictitious situation, or not everyone's forced to speak, right? Those who want to go up to the mic and give their testimony, they do. But we need to have a discipline by which we break it down. Where were you? How old were you? Had you seen any movies like that? Have you read any books like that before this occurred? What are your favorite movies? Did anyone in your family say this was going to occur to you? Did anyone tell you in their life that this is going to happen to you or to happen to them? Did you ever feel truly jealous that it hadn't happened to you, and so you were looking for that moment when it was going to occur to you? See how that works? You start parsing the situation to the point where you can maybe get down to the metaphysics of what might be driving someone to see this sort of stuff. And when you come up with a beautiful case where they're passing the polygraph test, they haven't had any previous experience, they didn't really enjoy what they saw, you've checked out their medical records, their psychiatric history, and they're just as level as a playing field, right? That's a weird analogy. They are your candidates. They are the ones that you really want to start leaning on to figure out what might have occurred. Once we have a bunch of results, then we start to see if there's any similarities between the occurrences. Perhaps there's different species of occurrences. Some people see apparitional ghosts that may walk around, you know? I guess I've had one other experience that I've mentioned on the show that some of you are maybe true autists. You're like, yeah, but you said you had this other experience. What about that? For those of you who are new, here goes again. This house right here hasn't had this problem in a really long time. But there was a time when both my girlfriend and I, who, because we had different schedules, I wouldn't wake her up after she went to bed. I'd sleep in the guest bedroom. We would feel things pushing on the bed. Most of the time, like a cat, sort of over by the head. And you'd feel the pillow go down, the neighboring pillow. You'd feel the mattress go down, just ever so slightly, like a adult cat walking towards your head. It's really strange. I'm allergic to cats, so I wouldn't. I don't have any, I don't sit around dreaming about them. So it's just a weird thing for me and a cat. It's just strange. She used to have a cat, but she hadn't had a cat in 20 years. All right, maybe even longer. But then there was a second version of it that was more profound. And it was as if someone was sitting on the bed. This was pretty intense. Like a weight of probably 100-pound person, which is a small person, right? But last time I felt it, I had come home and laid in bed, and it was sort of a warm summer night. The room was warm. And so you know how you leave your body half exposed because it's too hot to put the sheets on you. And so my butt was sort of, it's probably like 4 inches onto the bed. And I kid you not, it felt like someone was sitting on the mattress just behind my butt. And it was going down, and my mind just was like absolutely freaking out that someone was in the room and sat down next to me. I mean, it startled me. And that barely ever happens in my entire lifetime, right? So here's what's weird. So that happened to me. And my girlfriend actually moved out into her own place at one point. And she said it was still occurring at her new place, the cat thing. Which is weird. And then we have a mutual acquaintance that lived in Paris for a year or two, but at least lived in this one place. She had bought this penthouse or, I don't know, this condo over there. And she was warned that the place was haunted. And of course, she's from America. I think she was from New York or something. And she was just blowing it off the whole time. And she said when she came into where she was unpacking on one of the first days, she came into the bedroom and looked down at the mattress, and according to her, she saw 2 butt cheeks. It looked feminine to her, sitting on the mattress. Like broad daylight, indentation on the mattress. Absolutely, positively freaked this chick out. And she had the very analytical mind. She has a very analytical mind. She's not a person who's ever seen anything in her life. It was very startling to her. But she was like tough, and she's professional, so she's blowing it off. She's like, I'm not going to let this get to me. I don't know what the hell that was. And it disappeared, I think right in front of her face, and that was weird. So after a year of living there, these kind of disturbances, and especially the mattress pushing thing, was a big thing that occurred. And this is her bed that she brought to this location. It's not some furnished apartment, right? So after about a year, she sold the place to this gentleman. And then about half a year later or so, as the story goes, she met the guy at a party. And she's like, you're the guy that bought the house from me. He goes, oh, I don't live there anymore. And they had a conversation that I'm going to paraphrase because it's been a while since I've heard this. But essentially the dudes looked at her and said, you knew that fucking place was haunted when you sold it to me, didn't you? And she was like, I didn't want to say because I thought it was just me going crazy. He's like, oh yeah. He goes, I got tired of all that stuff going on. And I think that the key word between them as they ended the conversation was the mattress thing. Yeah, I'm done with that. Freaked him out. He was not a strong-willed man to stay in there a year like she was, right? Very interesting. So you have two people who are very counter to these sorts of experiences. You could tell they weren't people that were like, oh yeah, and I saw tons of ghosts before I moved there, and they just follow me around. I'm just a haunted person, right? It's these little stories from these people that really gains a lot of credibility with me, because they're sort of counterculture to the metaphysical supernatural world, and yet something was so consistent in this location in Paris that two professional people who had so much on their mind that seeing this kind of stuff was not going to be a meditation thing, right? Oh, I sat there and meditated in the lotus position on my bed, and then I woke up and saw it there. It wasn't like that at all. So on one level, any of you out there that have had that sort of experience, but you're the anti-culture person to actually have seen this multiple times, right? You've only had one or two experiences. I want to hear from you guys big time in the comment section, right? But the other thing I'm interested in is if I've kicked off any theories in your mind for how we could isolate the unprovable to each other, please say so in the comments as well. Now, the other interesting thing is that we have pets that have been filmed several times. It's sort of like the dog in Poltergeist from 1982, where the dog is seeing something in the room that's in the wall over the master bedroom bed and barking at it. Now, that's a fictional movie, of course, but there's all these videos where it looks like animals are seeing something that the humans aren't seeing. Now, in some cases, obviously, it could be an insect that we're not seeing or whatever. Now, if you give your cat catnip or something like that, then, of course, they're going to be tripping balls, and that doesn't count. But it looks like a lot of animals see things that, we don't see. What would be the difference between an animal and a human being in regards to seeing things? Well, they haven't been indoctrinated, have they? Maybe domesticated animals a little bit. But no one's saying, and we don't speak English to animals, and they completely understand all of the words that we say. Of course, they learn little command phrases, go get that, come back here. Did you do that? They hear your tone of voice, and they can read your soul, I think. But a dog and a cat and a deer and an antelope and all these things, maybe they can see more. Maybe some animals can see a lot and some see very little. Don't know. But I think that's another interesting avenue there. As I mentioned before on other episodes, as you go back in time, why is it that man is so spiritual? The Day of the Dead in South America. The temples in Japanese homes that worship those who have passed. I keep thinking it's not just a fictitious thing that is created by Japanese people to simply have something to soothe their own soul. It seems to me that prior to losing that vision of being able to see the afterlife, maybe they could see it back in the past, and now they can't see it anymore, but the tradition is there, and the faith of it genetically is still in the soul, right? The goal here is to open up a frontier, a brand new frontier for the human mind. I try to open as many as I can on this particular show because after you've done a lot in life, or you've gotten to a certain age in life, life becomes a pattern. It does. It doesn't matter where you are in the world, what you did for a living, how many family members you have, friends you have, blah, blah, blah. It becomes a pattern. And we're always searching for new avenues where it is sort of infinite for exploration. I haven't had a lot of you come in recently. I did have one probably in the last 6 months. But there's the common question about what do you think about the afterlife? And it's usually one of these things that no one pays attention to until they lose someone. And then it's right there in their face. Their question of what the afterlife might be. The imperative to decide whether or not it exists usually launches itself into the human mind once someone passes away. I need to make a decision. Where do I think this person went? Do I think I really lost them forever? Or do I think I'm going to see them again at some point in the future? Well, now let me give you a fictional scenario that we would probably all delight in if it actually occurred. You're in college. You're between the age of 18 and 28. And you lose a friend or relative of some sort. But in your cool new college in the near future, there's a whole wing, a whole degree that you can get that turns into a payable job researching this about the metaphysical afterlife. It's just a matter of enrolling in the classes. And now you get in there and there's a discipline. You start learning techniques that other people have pioneered just before you got there. Maybe it's only a 20-year class, 20-year-old class, 20-year-old discipline. Sure, it reaches back as far as recorded history to cannibalize every single theory of the afterlife, ones that have been turned into religions, ones that have been just belief systems over the years. They've already correlated and organized into groups, various experiences for various types of deaths and various types of interactions. But you bring your whole bag of tricks, and there's always something in your bag, most likely, that no one else has recorded. So you add your data to the database. It goes worldwide. It gets translated into every single language so everyone else can see what you experienced. And then man goes from fearing death as an imperative pseudo-intellectual exercise and self-realization. And it goes into this comfort zone of, well, you know what? We have enough evidence to prove that there's an afterlife. We just simply don't know exactly what it is, where it is, and how it works. But at least we're making progress. We're having, first of all, the conversation. Second of all, we have a vocabulary that we can use that normal people can understand. Okay, it's not Latin words or a bunch of crazy crap. And so you can dialogue about it. Maybe you go in and you get freaked out. You get so freaked out that you need to take a break. You pull back. It's too much too soon. So, but you did hear a few things that gave you a framework to think about it. And so you reintroduce yourself into the conversation as soon as you can. There's at least one listener out there that lost her father. I don't know if she listens anymore. But we had a telephone call once. We had a few phone calls, actually. And there was a situation where she truly believed in her spirit of spirits, in her heart of hearts, that her father went to an afterlife and still participated in her life in some intuition way, in a wave of love, all the above, right? But she was sort of scared to have the conversation, it seemed to me, on the telephone until we met. And then I said, well, hey, I think that's completely real. And let me give you some examples of why I think it's real and how it actually occurs to us. And I shared my opinion of my experiences in this. And I felt this, what I think I recognized as a huge epiphany of relief, that it was okay for her to have this conversation with someone. No one was going to judge her. As a matter of fact, quite the opposite. She was going to have a productive dialogue about, oh my God, I think you're right. I think my father, who died too soon, he died much earlier than he should have. Of course he's still hanging out with me. He wasn't finished being my father. And so I need guidance from time to time, and now my gut instinct is very specific, as before it may have been a little more figurative, but now it's very specific. The Chinese, like I always say, they always say, what's your gut tell you? You're thinking about this thing, what's your gut tell you? Maybe that's a cosmic wave of intuition from those who have lived, who know you really well and go, well, I know he or she would want this to happen in their life. So even though they're very excited about that experience, that's going to lead down a path that I don't think they want to go down, just based on everything that I've seen them desire in this world, and especially the things that I've seen them criticize in this world, things that they never want to experience again, that most people would agree that no one should experience those things again. Some people don't want to experience pain, but it's exactly what they need. It's like they play a guitar and it hurts their hands and they get bored, but they really want to be a guitar player, so you keep pushing them. The gut instinct is go, 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 go. If it's hard, that just means that's where you need to practice. Keep going, something like that. We worry about things like population control on this planet. Because in our world, we have a physical limitation of the geography that we can inhabit safely, right? How many resources can we harvest to feed everyone, right? Now, those who produce shitty food always want to tell you that they had to do it because otherwise everyone would starve to death. Bullshit, okay? That's just a fucking lie so they can sell you GMO gut-rotting stuff so you have to drink tons of probiotics to repair your belly, right? All lies. But now imagine we had so many billion people on this planet to physically occupy the planet. But then we had maybe a near infinite supply of people that have lived and died either on this planet or other planets. Perhaps they never took form in the physical. They've always been spiritual. They like the spiritual side. But now we have access to their wisdom, their creativity. The arts of the world would explode, wouldn't they? How many great musical pieces would come out once the spirits remind us that you don't have to fucking auto-tune the human voice to hear the most beautiful sound that could be made on this planet, right? The human voice is the most beautiful thing. To run it through a mechanical device to screw with it is sort of an insult to our entire genetic pattern, isn't it? We are controlled by bankers that want us to use oil-based money. All right, that's a problem that needs to be fixed. We have food that gives us cancer. We have probably electronics that gives us cancer. All this other shit, stress, whatever it is. And the gods out there go, or the spirits, gods to us, they simply say, okay, that stuff, stop doing that, right? And if you want to really get rid of this problem, do this, do that, be here at this time, push the red button, comb your hair, snort your nose, whatever it needs to happen, happens, and things start resolving themselves. They're not living your life for you, right? You still have to do all the hard work. What if they said you got to climb Mount Everest? Some 400-pound person's got to climb Mount Everest and all their problems are going to go away. Someone's telling them that. But because the whole world's getting good information from a bunch of different sources, they're like, I guess I got to lose 300 pounds or 250 pounds so that I can make the trek. I've got to increase the efficiency of my lungs. I've got to work out in a gym so I can handle it. I got to practice at base camps and all this other stuff because I'm going to get to the top of that mountain. This could be an analogy, of course, and solve my problem. Which begs another topic that could be an episode all by itself. But let me end with this. One of the big questions about the afterlife and all of this sensory conversation about the metaphysical world really comes down to one sort of question, which is, what do you hope to gain from all this new knowledge? I guess I would ask myself the question, right? Part of it would be truth with a capital T, right? Everybody wants that. Do I want to know what's going to happen in my future? Not really. I like that to be a mystery. But, what's the big lie that I'm living? What have I been told it's not true? That's kind of information I'd like to know. But now, what if God showed up and said, stop doing that? I'm not telling you because it's a rule and I'm going to punish you for doing it. It's up to you, man. You want to know what hell is? Hell is doing that over and over and destroying your life. Can you see how it destroys your life? Maybe it's an alcoholic. Maybe it's a drug addicted person. Maybe it's someone with any addiction of any kind. Porn, gambling, anything. And they're like, but I want to. And God says, well, I'm going to leave it up to you because I made a universe of choice. But I'm telling you, that's the thing that is robbing you of all the destiny that you wish you had had when you were a little kid. And see, think about it. I met God. I met the real God, okay? And he or she, it told me this is the nemesis to my future, to my happiness, and I know I'm not happy. Would you suddenly stop because God said so? I mean, maybe if God said, okay, let me give you a peek at, hell and brimstone. Okay, see this here? See, this is hell. See, the person's being tortured constantly. That's where you're going to go if you keep doing this. The old Christian methodology. Maybe you would do it for that arbitrary reason, but then you would be doing it not for yourself in terms of happiness. You'd do it to avoid hell, some horrible place. It's not the right reason. You want to do it because you want yourself to live the best life that you can live, right? In all the cases of everything I've ever experienced, and there's another experience I won't even go through, which is a hallway experience you can hear in other episodes, I was happy. I was very content and very happy. Sometimes I was making a tremendous amount of money, and I was happy, probably because of that and the luxury that provided. But there was other times I was broke as a joke and happy, and these things happened to me. When I saw Walt, I was very, very successful with my video game company. It was booming, making tremendous amounts of money for everybody. So that was the precursor to that experience. Maybe that loosened me up. Maybe when we're in some turmoil, we lock up and we don't see things. I don't know. This is part of our protocol that we'd have to figure out what's true and what's false. Were you under distress? Were you happy? How much money were you making at the time? Were you in a successful relationship? Etc., etc. It's food for thought, right? It makes you think, doesn't it? My utter fantasy for the near future, 5 to 10 years from now, is that we cleaned up the world back to the 70s. Not the Cold War 70s, but the cool disco, Grandmaster Flash 70s, and then the 80s, a new version of it, a completely new version. But a peaceful world where the problems that we have, we understand, we know what we need to do to fix them. We understand the difference between things that are just the human condition and things that are imposed on us by others who believe that they are higher than us. We extinguish the species of human beings that are greedy, who manage to get control over us. We literally rethrow society such that can't happen again. It sticks out like a sore thumb. The black sheep is the banker. Not that we want to be sheep, but you know what I mean. I want to see universities reborn, completely reborn from the bottom up. I want to see a university that is qualified to take a loan from the government and give it to a student to pay with interest. I want to see them prove that whatever they're taking your money for is employable. It's okay if you get a degree that's unemployable, but at least when you signed up for that degree, you know it was unemployable. Maybe the challenge is to make money off a degree that's been deemed absolutely unemployable. But I want to see the physical sciences of the world bud into more theoretical sciences where it's okay not to know what exactly the solution, because you're going for it. I want to see the metaphysical world be explored. I want to see us understand that the human body is probably a symbiotic thing that is way beyond just bacteria inside the human body. That there are spiritual realities. I want to see history reinterpreted as a literal definition of the times that these people lived in. When you see all the pharaohs of Egypt worshiping, animal-headed human beings at a time when they could render anything that they wanted to with art. They could paint anything, they could sculpt anything, and they chose to render cartoons to us. Maybe those things were real. Maybe that's what the creators of the world look like. This world. Maybe not God, the one definitive intelligence of the universe, but the species that's over us that made this place. Maybe there's a horse. Maybe there is an Anubis. It's just a different shaped head, that's all. I want to see any type of intellectual exploration that is serious be tolerated as serious, be funded, researched, books written on it. I mean, imagine going to a bookstore in the world that I am describing, and not only do you have your fictional sections that have all the heartthrob novels and the Lord of the Rings kind of fantasy stuff from brilliant minds, but we have, instead of having two little columns in your bookstore that's the new age stuff that's laughed at and scoffed at, there's a whole half of the store that's all theoretical sciences and exploration of what it is to be human. And it's the most popular section. New books coming out all the time. We're dragging these things home and plowing through them and passing them off to our friends and plowing through the next book. And we're just having our minds expanded by each other. Now, obviously, there's an internet version of that. There's a digital version of that. However you publish it, I don't care. YouTube videos have become absolutely fascinating to all of us who marathon through them, because you have wild-ass theories like no forest on flat Earth. Hey, as you know, I covered that. I think it's bunk, but I'm so glad the dude went through the theory. It's a great way for me to extinguish that theory in my mind, but also expand my mind and go, yeah, that is interesting. Maybe all this petrified wood was old silicon trees, What if all of reality was nothing but a metaphor? Everything. Why does numerology work for some people? Because it is the sort of mathematical metaphor and link between realities. Who knows, right? I think that stuff's fascinating. Not my cup of tea, but whatever. As long as it makes people think, they're going to expand their mind and find other things that are probably more tangible in whatever metaphysical or physical way that makes them a more interesting person. And eventually, 20, 30 years down the line, they stumble on to the next era of human development in a way that everyone can reproduce the experiment. And we all see the result. And we're like, oh my God, you realize if you do this, while Disney walks out of your television? Cool, right? I think you feel me. If you haven't been to deepthoughtsradio.com, please go. There's video, audio, a locked Facebook group, and a Patreon page. For those of you who support me on Patreon, super appreciate it. Most of the videos on YouTube are monetized. I do not attempt to run any pre-roll ads, so if there is a video out there with a pre-roll ad, it is merely something that's been turned on my behalf that I'm unaware of. I just run little banner ads. The average income per month is $16 from YouTube. So I'm pretty sure the YouTube channel is shadow banned because of the topics. I'm just thankful that they leave me alone after that. One of the things you can do to test if I'm shadow banned is to get on a computer that's absolutely never seen Deep Thoughts, no one's ever been to a video of ours, and then look up Moon Hoax, which has quite a few hits, but look up things. If you search on Deep Thoughts, you'll probably find it, but it's really the keywords that are the most powerful ones. So, for instance, if you search on Moon Hoax, for instance, and you see a video that only has 1,000 views, but you scroll 4 or 5 pages down and you don't see the one that I did that's got 15,000 views, that's a pretty good sign that one of more interest is not topping one of less interest. Of course, there is release dates that get involved in that too. But when you search, you should find the most relevant to your search terms first and less relevant down below. Anyway, something to check. Something to report back on the locked Facebook group or in the comments section. Anyhow, that's it for tonight. Take care of yourself and someone else, and I'll see you in the next Deep Thoughts. Over now.